So Frankie Edgar versus Marlon Vera has now been added to the main card of UFC 268 in November. Usman versus Covington 2. What an amazing fight this is, and what an amazing addition to that UFC 268 card this is as well, because that card is looking amazing right now, and it just keeps getting better and better. Frankie Edgar versus Marlon Vera, two top-ranked bantamweights. You got Frankie Edgar, number 8 in the world, of course, coming off that really, really bad loss to Corey Sandhagen. Before that, he technically had a win over Pedro Munoz. I thought it didn't really go his way, but they gave him the win, so he is actually in a decent position right now in the bantamweight division, and if he wins this one against Marlon Vera, he's looking right back towards that top 5 against the bigger names of the bantamweight division, and it's an amazing fight. Marlon Vera, number 13, recently coming off a really amazing performance against Davy Grant, got the win there, redeemed himself in a rematch as well, which is always very nice to do. Marlon Vera, man, a massive opportunity for him. He had a massive opportunity before against Jose Aldo, and he's only needed to win one fight to get himself right back in there with a top name in the bantamweight division. Very good for Marlon Vera. Of course, before the Jose Aldo loss, he beat Sean O'Malley. Great wins in the bantamweight division, and speaking of Sean O'Malley, he's not going to be too happy about this news, because I hear they were planning on doing Frankie Edgar versus Sean O'Malley in November. However, Frankie Edgar called him out for November. He wants to fight in November. I believe that's the MSG card. So, of course, Frankie Edgar from that area, he wants to be on that card. Very understandable. But Sean O'Malley doesn't want to be on that card because of the taxes. And also his coach has an ADCC trials tournament on that card as well. He wants to fight in December. So Marlon Vera said, you know what? I'll take the fucking fight with Frankie Edgar. No doubt. Takes it. And now it's on the card. Amazing main card in November. I feel like Marlon Vera is going to get the job done here, in all honesty. I'm a big fan of Frankie Edgar. I kind of want to see him do well and rebound, because it was a really, really tough knockout to watch over and over and over again against Corey Sandhagen, and it was a very bad one. But however, he has taken a bit of time off, and he's still Frankie Edgar, so he could have a chance to go out there and just completely ragdoll Marlon Vera for 3 straight rounds, and it being a free rounder definitely does benefit Marlon Vera, but also Frankie Edgar, because Vera pushes an amazing pace, has great cardio in the later rounds. That's how he beat Davy Grant in his last fight. Tough first round, came back in the second and really dominated in the third, basically got a 10-8 round. Great matchup. I just think Marlon Vera is going to be a little bit too much for Frankie Edgar, and maybe this has been one KO loss too many. Don't get me wrong, Edgar hadn't been KO'd for a very, very long time in his career, but then he goes out there and he gets chinned by Ortega quite badly. Then he goes out there and he gets chinned by the Korean Zombie quite badly. Has a scrap with Pedro Munoz and gets a win, don't get me wrong. Then he goes out there, gets really badly switched out cold by Corey Sandhagen. Good matchup for Marlon Vera. I think he can get this one done, but if it does get messy, I don't mind Frankie Edgar's chances, but man, I just don't really feel like I can trust Frankie Edgar's grappling in a match anymore, because it's been so many fights since that Yair Rodriguez matchup, and Yair Rodriguez, new to the game, hadn't really been tested in a grappling yet, got shown some holes in his game. Frankie Edgar went out there, beat him up on the ground, got a doctor stoppage in the second round, I believe it was. But since then, Edgar doesn't seem to be out grappling everyone. Now, don't get me wrong, Pedro Munoz is not really a guy you want to be shooting takedowns on anyway, but Edgar doesn't really seem to be out grappling anyone, and before, in the earlier parts of his career, he would usually always have somewhat of a grappling advantage. But it doesn't seem to be there anymore, and I have some evidence for this as well. The Cub Swanson matches. He has 2 fights against Cub Swanson. The first time he fought Cub Swanson, when he was closer to his prime, he dominated him, took him down over and over and over again, beat him up, finished him in the very final seconds of the fight, maybe something like that. Then, the second time he fought Cub Swanson, a little bit later in his career, he couldn't get a single takedown on Swanson, and he tried a lot of times. I feel like maybe the grappling of Edgar is not as effective as maybe it once was before in his career. He is getting a little bit older. Marlon Vera is a young guy. I know he's been around for a while and he has a record like a veteran would, but he's been around for a long time, a lot of experience, a lot of learning lessons that he's been given in the cage as well. He's already been taught about grappling defense and stuff like that. He's already had those fights to correct those mistakes. He's got some momentum back, and I think he's going to go out there and beat Frankie Edgar. I don't see him getting a TKO, but I think it's a great style matchup for him. Frankie Edgar likes to fight on the inside sometimes, get real close and personal. Marlon Vera in his last fight against Davy Grant showed amazing elbows on the inside. I think that's going to be a huge factor here. We saw Ortega use elbows on Frankie Edgar. Marlon Vera's got really nice elbows as well. It's not good for Edgar, man. I don't think this is the answer to save his career right now, okay? Pun most definitely intended. I think this is a real problem. And I think Marlon Vera's got this one with the elbows. If Edgar wants to get in close, Marlon Vera's got the elbows. If Edgar wants to stay at range and move around, Marlon Vera's got leg kicks, calf kicks, shut down O'Malley's leg, of course, notoriously. Beat a lot of opponents with great front kicks to the body. He's got good spinning kicks, good kicks to the head as well from the outside. He can grapple himself. He went out there and out-grappled Song Yudong in moments of that fight, and Song Yudong has shown that he's actually pretty adept at grappling now in his career. Did good in the grappling against Cody Stamen, showed that he had some good defense, and Marlon Vera was able to get him down a couple of times. Marlon Vera can push. He's got a granite chin. I don't see him getting KO'd. I don't see him getting submitted. He's got wicked jiu-jitsu himself. He's got good scrambles, great cardio, and he invests well with calf kicks and damaging shots. I think he's got all the recipe to beat Frankie Edgar in November, and it's a great fight to add to that card, man. That card is something special, okay? Listen to this card right now as I read it out to you. Main event, Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington, okay? Co-main event, which I believe is going to be, by the way, Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza 2. It's 100% going to be that fight. Or it's Rose Namajunas versus someone, because Trevor Whitman, Gaethje on the card, Usman on the card. He's going to put Namajunas on the card as well. Feature fight, Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler. Fourth fight down the list, Frankie Edgar versus Marlon Vera. Opener of the main card, Sean Strickland versus Luke fucking Rockhold. The card is done. We don't need Sean O'Malley. We don't need anyone else. It's even got Edmund Shabazian on the fucking prelims. This card is so good. And so is the October card. I wish they wouldn't do this sometimes, in all honesty. They sometimes really stack the pay-per-view cards, and we're left with absolute shit on the fight night cards. There's nothing on the fight night cards, but then out of nowhere, there's this pay-per-view 2 in a row within the same 2-week period. This will be, because it's a pay-per-view right after another. Even though the first one isn't a pay-per-view, it's still got a pay-per-view title and headline, UFC 267. Don't understand it, but whatever. Great cards back to back. It's going to be an amazing one. I feel like Marlon Vera's got the job done, but for Sean O'Malley, it's what happens when you say no. When you're not ready, someone else gets the opportunity. And I feel like now that they've done this, especially because of what happened, and let's talk about Sean O'Malley for a second here, because this does really affect him, seeing as this was supposed to be his big jump up in opponents, and Marlon Vera, the guy that beat him, has now taken that. And for Frankie Edgar as well, let's mention this before we even get to Sean O'Malley. Edgar's thinking to himself, right, it's not the big name that I wanted, but it's the guy who beat the big name, so it's a better fight for me, in all honesty. Like Sean O'Malley, if he beats Frankie Edgar, Vera's going to jump up those rankings as well with Sean O'Malley. If Edgar beats Marlon Vera, he's kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone, seeing as Vera has that win over O'Malley. But this opens up some other options for Sean O'Malley. Said no to the Edgar matchup, Vera gets it. I think O'Malley's kind of going to get downgraded a little bit right now in terms of ranking position. I don't see him getting higher than Frankie Edgar in the rankings. You've got Garbrandt moving down to 125. Moraes has a fight coming up. Aldo's going to be looking for a title elimination bout. Same with Rob Font. Same with Corey Sandhagen. TJ Dillashaw's basically earned his title shot. I know that O'Malley's last video title was Dillashaw turns me down. Like, he's not going to take you on. He's got a title shot against the winner of Yan versus Sterling. Either way, it leaves very few names. Munoz is moving down to 125. I'm seeing Dominic Cruz's name right there staring at me. And I'm saying, I know that Dominic Cruz said that he wanted a higher ranked opponent. Right now, there's no higher ranked opponents that are going to be interested in Dominic Cruz. So unless Cruz wants to sit out for another whole year, I think they're going to do Cruz O'Malley, hopefully on the December card, on the pay-per-view main card, in the feature fight, or in the opener of the main card. Either way, I'm tuning in. Cruz is even coming off a win, which is actually pretty good for O'Malley. It shows that Cruz isn't completely done, and over the hill, it's still a credible win in the Bantamweight division. I think they could do that matchup, and if they don't do the Dominic Cruz matchup, and Cruz doesn't want that one and wants a higher ranked opponent, I think Sean O'Malley's going to get fucked over here in terms of opponents that he wants, because I'm just noticing that Howley and Paver's moved into number 15. The guy that shouldn't have really beat Kyler Phillips, but he did good against Kyler Phillips once Kyler Phillips completely gassed out after battering him in the first round and somehow not getting a 10-8 for it. Howley and Paver has just moved into number 15. That doesn't go unnoticed for me, because I know for a fact the UFC thinks Sean O'Malley would destroy Howley and Paver. And I would probably think so as well. Could be a good matchup for O'Malley. Another great matchup for him could be Cody Stamann, Rafael Assunção. Those are the only other names. He's really run out of options now. He had a couple of options, even including Marlon Vera in a rematch himself. He's kind of lost that by saying no and waiting until December, but you know what? He's going to fight in December, no problem. Cody Stamann would represent like a decent grappler for him to take on, same with Rafael Assunção. Both guys are kind of chinny as well. They've had their wars in their career. They've been around for a long time, especially in Assunção's case, coming off that KO loss to Cody Garbrandt. I think those are great matchups for Sean O'Malley, and maybe you should look into them, but if he wants a guy outside the rankings at bantamweight, there is a plethora of names outside the rankings as well. That's what's so good about the bantamweight division. He won't take on Timo Valiev. Don't see that one happening. I can see him entertaining the idea of a Brian Kelleher bout. They've had some beef before. Kelleher's been calling him out for a very long time. I can see him taking that one just to stay busy against an unranked guy. That's a pretty dangerous test, in all honesty. Adrian Yanez. Please, yes please, 3-0, amazing fighter, also got a whole bunch of hype. Maybe they want to do that one down the line, but Adrian Yanez sounds like an amazing matchup to me. And other than that, the only guy I can see outside the rankings that they could make a matchup with is Song Yadong. Striker, doesn't shoot takedowns, gonna stand up the whole time. O'Malley might like his chances in that matchup style-wise. Amazing fights to go for, though, for O'Malley, but right now, Frankie Edgar, Marlon Vera. I like that we're getting guys in the cage, and let's just add a few more fights to that November card's prelims. We've got the main card. Now what we need is one good fight on the prelims that can take the place of something on the main card if anything goes wrong, because something will go wrong. A fight will fall out of that main card. If they do add Namajunas Esparza 2, that would be amazing. That would stack it even further. We just need a solid set of prelims on that card, because in my opinion, the level of the prelims is what separates the pay-per-views. All of the great pay-per-views, you look at the prelims, you're like, oh my fucking god, this is what makes it so good. This is what makes a stacked card. It's very easy to have 5 decent fights on a pay-per-view. We don't always get it because it's only a $10 billion company, but it's very reasonable to expect 5 solid ranked fights on a pay-per-view. If you can start getting some good bouts on the prelims as well, we're in business. Amazing matchup. Glad Marlon Vera said yes. I'm going to check who people think are going to win. Let's check the Tapology rates. I haven't actually looked at this yet. Okay. Frankie Edgar, 63% of votes. I guess they're expecting him to completely out-grapple Marlon Vera. I guess. Maybe I'm off on this, but I believe that Vera's going to win this one, and a lot of people have got him here, 37%. A lot of them by TKO as well, 57% of that 37% by TKO. 63%, 100% of them by decision for Frankie Edgar on Tapology. So that's interesting. I'd like to see the odds, in all honesty. Maybe they do have Marlon Vera as an underdog if you're looking at those stats. I just think he's so big. He's got range. He made a really close fight with Aldo, and people aren't talking about that because Aldo schooled Pedro Munoz. Think about that now, really, in hindsight. I know we were thinking, oh, Aldo bounced back against Vera. Vera wasn't ready enough. This shows how bad O'Malley really is, how many levels below he is. But Aldo just schooled Pedro Munoz. All 3 rounds, completely annihilated him. Vera did really well in hindsight. You know what I'm saying? Vera did exceptionally well in hindsight. That's a good loss to look back on. Extremely close first 2 rounds with Aldo. Got his back taken in the 3rd round and couldn't get out of the body triangle. Not a bad performance, in all honesty. I'd rather have that than getting tooled up for 3 rounds like Pedro Munoz was. And look at Aldo's performance against Piotr Jan as well. This division, I think Marlon Vera fits right in the top 5. And I think we're going to see him in the top 5 over the next 2 or 3 years. Just sticking in there, fighting a whole bunch of guys. Maybe a title shot at the end of it, but I believe in Marlon Vera here. Tough, consistent, always going to be game in there. I think he can find a way to either finish Frankie Edgar or just beat him up enough to get a decision win over him as well. I'd go by TKO maybe. Maybe he eventually breaks down Edgar enough because Vera's got power as well. I'd go with Marlon Vera. Great matchup though. Edgar's dangerous. Has got that chance to out-grapple him, but I will say this. He ain't out-grappled no one since the fucking Yair Rodriguez matchup, and it's hard to bet on that, you know, because he's shot a lot of takedowns since then. It's not that he hasn't even tried to grapple with people. He shot a lot of takedowns since that Yair Rodriguez matchup, and he ain't really done much to anyone since then. And even before then, he was struggling with guys, getting them down and keeping them there. And Edgar's not really been a guy to just destroy guys on the ground. Maybe he does it to the smaller bantamweights. I think Vera's got the level of jiu-jitsu required, has dangerous jiu-jitsu on the ground, a great ground game himself, and I think that makes him a threat in all areas here for Edgar. I think he gets the job done. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. O'Malley got cucked. Vera versus whatever his name is. Edgar. How could I fucking forget? Edgar versus Vera. November card. Amazing stuff. Now let's focus on December. We need a great card there. I'll make a fucking card builder for December. There's no fights announced. I'll build a card and make a video out of it. That's good content. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.